Hello, ORGACOM students, and for some of you, this is probably the first time that you have seen a whiteboard presentation. I strongly urge you and recommend that you go through the previous sets that we have done, because definitely you need to go through them in order to understand some of the future group activities and lessons that we are going to have. Now, we have entitled this series as Orientation on Personal Finance, which is closely related to wealth and money management. We're doing this for several reasons. Number one, we want to hook it up with your experience in your field trip, because even if your field trip has some components that we're gonna hook up with ORGACOM, obviously there is still another side to the field trip that you can apply to your own personal life, and that's what we're gonna do today. We're going to hook it up with personal finance, wealth, and money management. Now, in the previous sessions, I talked about the 4 ways in which you could earn, and they are being an employee, being self-employed, or starting a small business, being involved in a big business, or getting involved in investments. We get this idea, the 4 cash flow quadrants, from Mr. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Now, each quadrant has its own pros and cons. I won't go through all of these things because they have been discussed in the previous sessions, but I'm just gonna have a brief summary here. An employee is good because you get stable income compared to being self-employed or having a small business, setting up a big business, or getting involved in investments. This is the most secure source of income there is. The problem, however, with being an employee is that the income level or the income stream that you could generate there is not as big as the income that you can generate from the other 3 quadrants. Number 2, another disadvantage of being an employee is that it is the most taxed quadrant. The biggest taxes are here. Why? Because the government wants to encourage getting involved in business and getting involved in investments. By getting involved in business, you create jobs. And with more jobs, you help our economy. The problem, however, with these other 3 quadrants is that they are riskier than being an employee. But you know the saying, no pain, no gain. Okay? If you want a bigger return than the returns that you can get from being an employee, therefore you have to take the risk and get involved in these other 3 quadrants. Now, what you have at the bottom of the chart is the timeline of our typical person. This is typical lifespan. And I've identified some of the major stages in the life of a person, like being a student from the age of 16 to 20 years old, being an entry-level employee from 21 to 25, being a supervisor from the age 26 to 30 years old, being a manager from 31 to 35. Obviously, there's still some stages in between, but we're going to jump through all of those and go to retirement, hopefully by the age of 60. Each stage has its own particular financial challenges, as well as its own particular financial opportunities. So the goal of your personal finance advisor is to give you tips on how you could navigate these particular challenges and generate wealth, basically. So, as a student, when you're still here, this level, at the age of 16 to 20 or 21 years old, you are not yet an employee. So just because you're not an employee, does it mean that you can't generate income? Well, you can, by getting involved in a small business, a big business, or being an investor. That's why if you see this chart here, it says here that you can become involved in business or investments even when you are still a student. How can you do that? Okay, let's look at this other portion in the chart. Let's say you're a student that has an allowance of 200 pesos a day. Okay, the first thing that you need to do before you could get involved in business and investments is to set up a cash cushion. Basically, a cash cushion is a sort of safety net for whatever emergency you might have. Now, for most of us, I don't think we have to worry about emergencies, because for most of us, our parents and our guardians are the ones that are sustaining our studies, and they also take care of our medical bills and our other expenses. But we might have our own personal emergencies. So let's say we set a cash cushion of 12,000. 12,000 pesos, which you can create in the following manner. So you have an allowance of 200 pesos a day. Let's say you decide to have a savings goal of 50 pesos a day. Instead of using up your 200 pesos, you will set aside 50 pesos every day. By setting aside 50 pesos every day, in a week you will have 250. And in a month, you will have 1,000. Now, if you continue to save, suppose you still don't have your cash cushion with you, if you continue to save for the next 12 months, you will be able to make your cash cushion of 12,000 pesos. Now, anything beyond 12,000 pesos, this would be something that you could already invest in business or investments.